Welcome to the virtual happy half hour. We'll be getting started in just a minute. As we wait for folks to join us on Zoom, just a reminder that we will be recording today's session. We'll be sending that out later today. We'll be getting started in about 30 seconds. All right, welcome to the virtual happy half hour for February 12th, 2021. And our topic today is selling after COVID, what's going back to normal and what isn't. And it does feel like perhaps the end is in sight. Maybe it's a little bit further down the road than we might like, but it's there. We're certainly in a better spot probably than we were this time, let's say March, when we started these back in 2020, Russ. I am Michelle Richardson, and I'm joined by Russ in California, as always. Welcome, Russ.
Thanks, Michelle. Yes, if we'd only known last March what we know now, what would have been different. And by the way, I just so people know who I am, I was in a meeting with Michelle this week. She said her job is to put lipstick on the pig. So I guess that would make me the pig, Michelle. Because she makes me look good. Hey, we're glad you're here joining us for this virtual happy half hour. No one will really know, but we want to start getting some guidance from the research we've seen and the conversations we've had with customers about what is going to change and what isn't as we go forward. So we're going to start with a little bit of kind of data around what's working with virtual selling and what we think may be going to happen. And then we'll talk about some tips that we've seen from data across a wide variety of business-to-business folks. We're sponsored this week by the Virtual Selling Bootcamp, which is a new offer that we have, a new program that we have to help people learn those basic skills so they can be more successful from a selling perspective, how to use not just visual, but even how to use phones and email more effectively, so that as you go through the selling process, you're working well with those. So with that, Michelle, what do you have for us to start?
Well, we're going to get started with some polls. So we want to find out a little bit about what's going on with our audience today. And so, Russ, if you could release the first poll. And what we want to find out is what is COVID's impact? What has COVID's impact been on your business compared to where you originally expected at the start of the pandemic? Was it worse than you expected, about what you expected, or better than you expected? Because we certainly know that COVID in and of itself has had a huge impact on our businesses, but it also is going to have an impact on business as to where it goes forward.
And if we think about the last year, there have been waves, right, where it's been good or bad or worse or better. Particularly, I think of people in the restaurant business, just how disruptive it's been, or hospitality in general, how disruptive it's been overall. So we're getting pretty close. We'll give them just another maybe 10 seconds, and we'll share the results.
Actually looking much more evenly distributed than I was expecting. So we're looking at about 38% said that it was worse than they expected, and 33% about what they expected, and 29% better than they expected. So an interesting spread of results there.
Very interesting from a pretty much even spread across the board.
So on to the next poll question. This one I am really personally excited to see the responses on.
And I'll say you may have to scroll down to get everything that's all the options. And we give you up to 3, so you can read through all of them and decide kind of what you look forward to the most when this is all over.
Yes. So perhaps for those of you who are, some of us maybe our areas are a little bit more open for business, and we may be able to have some of those lunches with customers and that kind of thing. But curious to see what comes up.
A lot of choices here. Picking just your top 3 is going to be a little bit difficult.
Exactly. I was kind of trying to take this myself, Russ, and try to figure out what I was most looking forward to, and it's a little bit of all of the above, to be honest. Just that semblance of normalcy.
Yeah. Although I don't think that, sitting at O'Hare Airport, waiting for a delayed flight, trying to decide between the Chicago's best hot dog and the deep dish pizza there, sort of by gate C-17, is something that I'm really going to miss, or really feel like I'm back when that's happened. All right, let's take out 5 more seconds, and then we'll share the results.
At least if you're sitting in the airport, though, it's a sign that you're traveling and things are getting back to normal. So if you look at that silver lining.
I agree. So here's the top ones. Nobody is looking forward to wearing real pants, Michelle.
I can, from a comfort perspective, I can understand that. It's kind of nice just to kind of worry about what's from the waist up, but
yep.
Having lunch with a customer is pretty high up there.
I appreciate the fact, I really like the number 2. I think it's number 2 there, that informal conversation before and after the sales call. It's one of the things. I was on the line with a friend of mine yesterday talking about how hard it is to get relational conversations to happen when you're apart, and they feel forced, whether it's your coworkers or whether it's your clients. And so just being able to have some of that catch up, that's sometimes the most creative time. And then not wearing a mask. I think we're all looking forward to that one. Those are all great.
Yeah, excellent.
So thank you all. Should we move on to number 3?
One more poll, yes. So we've talked about what we've missed, and let's talk about what's really been the best part of virtual selling this year. The silver lining of what perhaps we've been able to accomplish. Certainly, there's an efficiency standpoint to being able to talk to more customers. The paperwork, I personally, when appreciated the lack of traffic on my daily commute to my home office. So, be interesting to see what the crowd thinks.
My expenses application thinks I've broken up with it. I keep getting these messages like, please come back, please, we want you back. So, all right, about 5 more seconds and we'll close this one too. All right. Again, good distribution across a lot of these topics. But I love to see it when sort of good salesmanship comes up at the beginning in terms of better focused meetings, being able to touch more people more often, and then balanced, of course, by being able to be at home more. So all great results. I guess I should share those. Sorry. Now everybody can see them.
And these results are playing in quite a bit to the broader data that's out there relative to the advantages of virtual selling, and that is those more focused meetings, that the efficiency there and being able to make contact with more folks throughout the day. All right. Well, thank you all for sharing with us and giving us your perspective. So let's talk a little bit about COVID's impact on B2B selling. And, before we can really talk about what does post-COVID look like, what is that going to look like for us, then we have to at least acknowledge the changes that have come upon us. So this is data from McKinsey. This was back from October 2020. I believe we've referred to this data in the past, but it's important and it certainly does bear repeating. Business to business revenue from in-person traditional selling is down 55%. That should be no surprise to anybody out there in our audience, just under the circumstances. B2B revenue, though, from video conference is up 69%. And actually, revenue that can be attributed back to digital channels such as chat is up 23%. So video is not the only digital channel. We also have phone and chat as well. 75% of B2B decision makers say online or remote selling is equally or more effective for engaging existing customers. And we've heard that even from our customers, from organizations that we work with, that virtual, it feels easier when you've got that existing relationship to make that transfer. But also 76% of business to business decision makers say online and remote selling is equally or more effective for acquiring new customers. And that's a little bit more of a surprise, because we've also heard organizations saying that it's a little bit harder to prospect and open new doors virtually. At least they were saying that earlier in the pandemic, but I think folks are getting used to using those virtual tools, and certainly it can be an effective platform. We've talked about this before, not on the slide, but now we're seeing that 70 to 80% of buyers prefer buying digitally. And so that, again, is something as we move forward post-COVID that we have to take into consideration, because regardless of how badly we as salespeople want to get back out in the field, our buyers may not be quite as anxious to see us.
And Michelle, I was just going to share that I saw some data from Gartner a week or so ago that in a certain age demographic, sort of, millennial and younger, something like 80% of those folks would just as soon do the entire sales transaction without having to meet face-to-face with a salesperson. Right. So we've got a wave of folks who are used to interacting digitally, and it's now become by far their preferred means.
Right. And I think even you're 100% correct there. And even generations who maybe are not as used to interacting digitally have gotten more comfortable with it over time. And other research that I've seen, and particularly Forrester, is saying that COVID has simply accelerated trends that were already building. So maybe they weren't building as quickly, but the industry was moving towards digital channels before COVID. So COVID has certainly had an impact, but we can't blame it all on this one pandemic for the direction that we're moving. So obviously, as we've been talking, virtual is here to stay. And the Strategic Account Management Association published an article actually just last week with some data on the future of virtual and digital selling. And what they found was that 26% of sales organizations expect that virtual selling will remain their primary strategy for customer interaction at least 3 years out from now. So post-pandemic, 26% of organizations expect to keep virtual selling as their primary mode. 43% plan to optimize or kind of integrate what I would consider a hybrid sales strategy that combines virtual and in person. And 31% expect to go back to their pre-COVID strategy. We also put a survey out to our respondents in conjunction with this webinar invitation. And so some of the trends that we're seeing with those responses coming back, we asked folks before COVID, what was your ratio of in-person to virtual selling? And that average response was 80% in-person, 20% virtual. And then after COVID, we asked the same question. What do you expect it to be post-COVID? And the change is now 55% in-person, 45% virtual. So again, that hybrid does seem to be more of the trend moving forward. As much as we as salespeople, again, want to be face-to-face in front of our customers, it's probably going to be some kind of mix moving forward. That also has some implications in terms of our skill sets for our teams, how we use digital tools, and our agility across the entire sales process. So we've also talked about challenges. So as virtual selling is being here to stay, we also wanted to look at what are the challenges and trends that still exist with regard to a virtual selling environment. And one of the most common things that we hear from our customers, the research from other sources also plays out. This is all data from our virtual happy half hour surveys. It's also data that's coming from that strategic account management article as well. But one of the most common things we hear is, how do I engage my customer virtually? How do I read those cues? How do I build rapport, particularly if they don't turn their webcam on? What does that look like? How do I get that face-to-face experience in a virtual setting? And certainly virtual selling can be more efficient, but as we even saw in our poll results, you miss that informal conversation before and after the formal sales call, where your advocate can maybe give you some feedback or another chance to build rapport. That collaboration with stakeholders, getting everyone to the table, can be a challenge. It requires more planning. You can't just drop in for a walk-in sales call when you're needing to meet virtually. And the expectation, this one was an interesting one. The expectation is that virtual selling means you can do more with less. So maybe you have fewer sales staff. Maybe you need to speed up the process. So, all of that all plays into challenges. We even had a chat comment that third-party evidence is much harder. If you are relying on tours, on site visits, on demonstrations, it absolutely can be more of a challenge to sell virtually. So Russ mentioned our virtual boot camp at the beginning of our session today. And if these sales challenges, these virtual selling challenges resonate with you, if you expect that your sales team is going to have some level of virtual selling moving forward, and if your most recent sales call looks like the cat video that's been circulating along the internet, if you've made the mistake of the cat filter, then perhaps you need our virtual selling boot camp. And as Russ indicated, this is a 4-session workshop. It's packed with very, very practical tips for how to sell virtually, things like using your webcam to close deals, practice virtual presentation techniques, using tools like Zoom and Teams, Soapbox, to really control the meeting and build trust, in addition to other selling skills, but we really focus on those critical virtual skills. This may be for you. So I encourage you, if you're interested in learning more, to email us at contact@thebrooksgroup.com. We have sessions starting this spring. Again, it's a 4-session workshop, and hopefully we can help you avoid the fails of the cat filter.
Yeah. What I love best about that cat filter, if you can go back one slide, Michelle, is that if you notice the text there, this is a court hearing in Texas, it says recording of this hearing or live stream is prohibited. And yet around the world now, there is a recording or a picture of this going on. So not only is it about the tools, but it's also about understanding the laws that we have. So what are we going to change? What does look the same? And so I'm going to draw an analogy here between where we are in business to business sales, COVID, and the PGA. Many salespeople golf, and between 66 and 2021, you've got 55 years of changes. The basic game is the same. You start at the tee, you keep the ball in the fairway, you put it on the green, you make the putt, you get the score. But a lot of the game has changed as well. Jack was using persimmon woods. Today we have graphite shafts. Jack Nicklaus in 66 was 26 years old. He was in his career about 5 years, won 3 tournaments, made a grand total of $111,000. Brooks Koepka, and I went back to 2019. He was 29, so a little older than Jack, been in his career about 7 years. He also won 3 tournaments, made $9.7 million. So efficiency per transaction has gotten a long way up. But what I wanted to point out in this is notice the fitness. When Jack Nicklaus came on the tour, when he was winning, when he was young, he was not the most trim athlete. In fact, golfers were perceived to be not really athletes. Today, this kind of started with Tiger, but especially now with Koepka, he's rebuilt his game. He has muscled up. He has gotten in shape. And I think that's a great analogy for us as we think about what COVID is doing. I think we've got to think about, are we in shape? And really ask the question, how has our approach to sales changed in the last 50 years? if we're that old, or if maybe from when we began, because a lot of times we haven't changed much at all. So here's 3 areas kind of to think about. In the game of golf, the average player around the world spends just over $200 per year on equipment because they're always looking for that edge. And so we're now in that place as we start to think about selling after COVID. What's going to be what we do? And where historically maybe we could increment our way to success, that now may be too slow. So we're going to have to place some bets. Forrester Research says there has been a huge consumerization of B2B sales. That is, our business buyers are looking for similar things to the consumer. And what a lot of those folks are saying is, hey, they're looking for the use of video. They're looking at being able to use multiple channels to get to market. The one that is most convenient for them is where they want to buy our products. And they're also much more influenced by brands than they have been in the past. So let's talk about a couple of those trends. Number one, we have historically, over the last 20 or 30 years, been revenue driven. The bigger you can get your revenue, the faster, the better. And while that's going to continue to be the case, that it's important, we are seeing some trends that now profitability is actually moved up in terms of importance, that there's going to be greater pressure on the sales team to deliver margin, to hold margin. Some of that is because of resources we've eaten up through the pandemic. Some of it is just this recognition that we've got to get ready for whatever comes next. And maybe we've been running our businesses a little too close to the edge. And so what that's going to mean is we've got to think a little bit differently about how we compete. I am hearing reports in nearly every industry that some of the competitors have just said, you know what, we're going to go low. We're going to try and win just to get the business, maybe to be able to even keep the doors open. But I think that smart players, those who want to be the Brooks Koepkas, who optimize their way to win tournaments, they're going to be the ones who really focus in on those opportunities where both you are adding value that you get margin for, and where the customers understand and see that value. I worked for a business one time that when I did an analysis, 92% of our revenue and a greater percentage of our profitability, by the way, came out of about 20% of the products. And as I started to dig into it, historically, what I found was there was this argument that said, well, if I don't offer that product, I'm not really in that business. And I reversed the argument. I said, well, if you're not selling any of it, you're not in that business anyway. And so I think there's going to be a lot of scrubbing of product lines. What is profitable? What isn't? And really focus in on those things that help your business grow. Number two, prospecting continues to be the lifeblood of any good sales organization. And we are going to do more of that, but we've got to get smarter about how we do it. How do we intelligently start a conversation? And there's this growing use of social media and how we can connect and work our way into the right to have the conversation. I made a mistake 2 weeks ago. I was online. They were talking about low interest rates, said, figure out what your payment is. I did it. I introduced both my email address and my phone number. I know that's a big mistake. And all of a sudden my phone exploded. I think I've gotten probably 60 phone calls from 3 different numbers trying to push me. And what they've pushed me all right. They've pushed me completely out of any interest in ever talking to any of them because they didn't earn the right. They just began to hammer me as soon as they got the lead. So we need to think about how we do that. We've talked a lot at the Brooks Group about thought leadership and the importance of being able to communicate and to help our customers get educated. But we're even seeing some transition there, that we go from just sharing thought leadership to how do we make more sense out of it. Topo Research just did some research. They said that if you talk about the average business-to-business buyer, they're spending 17% of their time with salespeople, 27% of their time doing online research. And then when they find information, they say 89% of them are able to find really good quality information that they trust, but 43% of the time that information is contradictory. So we not only have to become those thought leaders that can help our customers understand what's happening, but we have to help them make sense out of what we're presenting and even what our competitors are presenting, so that they can move forward and make those conversations. And it's really important, I believe, to have those conversations in a smart and crisp way. And then last of all, we've got to make it very clear, why us? What's our value proposition? If your only connection with your customers is because you quote unquote have a great relationship, I think you need to consider those accounts at risk because as we move forward, people are making decisions off of more than just relationships. And again, Dun Bradstreet reports that when it comes to finding leads, you're going to need to know something about your customers because your customers are expecting you to know about their business and what their needs might before that first conversation. So what's next? Kind of the middle ground as we're going through the process. If you're out playing the fairway, I am not a good enough golfer to do this, but Michelle, if you want to kick over the next slide, when you're on the fairway, you want to sometimes be thinking about where do I want to play my next shot from? Is my approach wedge from 80 yards better than my 9-iron from 120? And so we want to place our shot. So as we go through this, we also want to be thinking about how we want to place the interactions that we have with our clients. What really is our business? Think about Amazon. When they broke out into the business, they were about a wide selection of goods. How do we get lots of information? And now they've sort of morphed their value proposition to instant delivery. I did some research this morning, 30,000 vehicles, 20,000 trailers, and 70 planes as a part of their delivery. So we need to think about what are we really delivering and how can we enhance that? If we run a series of delivery trucks, are there more things that we can put on that truck that increases and aids in our profitability that our customers need? McKinsey defines it this way. They say we all need to get an unvarnished, no holds barred view of our full potential, both from our portfolio and our performance. Hold a barbecue, get rid of the sacred cows in the portfolio, get in shape to figure out what you're really selling and how you make money on it. A big change that we're going to see going forward is face-to-face meetings. Those in-person meetings need to mean more. We're still going to use our virtual meetings based on the things we've talked about: customer restrictions in their facilities, trying to keep your team safe, coverage and responsiveness, maybe even just people wanting to be at home. We'd seen a trend for how it was much harder to recruit long-haul truckers before the pandemic because the generation of people now in the workforce don't want to be gone all the time. And while there'll always be those road warriors, some of our teams are going to say, hey, I'd rather have a job where I can be a little closer to home. So how do we make them more powerful face-to-face? We're seeing things like the face-to-face meetings are going to take place deeper in the sales cycle. There'll be more participants and probably more senior participants. And so we've got to up our presentation games. We've got to up the way in which we engage folks. Accenture encourages us to create selling moments that matter. And what that looks like in your business, I'll leave for you to think about. But anytime you're in front of a customer, just think about, how do I make this a real memorable experience? How do I make it the best meeting that they're going to have that week? And how do I position myself as a vendor who can help them? And then the last thing through the selling process is, how do we let our sellers know what's happening around them? My experience is that salespeople tend to be pretty lousy at sharing information across a team: markets, competitors, pricing. And there's a lot of tools for that. Team and Slack and Chatter are just a few of those. But those are the tools. The question is, how do you provide a culture that encourages sharing information? For example, just think about if your competitor introduced a brand new pricing strategy on Monday morning, how long would it take it for news of that to filter through your entire organization and be ready to react to it? And if that answer is it may take a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, in this new world that we're working in, that may be a couple of weeks too long. And then finally, the last thing we want to do is rethink the way we care for our customers. The golfing analogy is you drive for show and you putt for dough. So existing customers will continue to be the ones that propel and keep our business strong and in shape. Number one, customers now want the answer they want now. There's a blending between inside and outside. From their perspective, they both can represent the organization. I worked for a company a few years ago that used a rep network. And every time we'd meet with the reps, they kept pleading with us to give them an app so that they could see inventory status, get current pricing, place orders. And we were struggling to find one that worked with our ERP system. And I know that cost us business because we couldn't give our sales folks those kind of immediate answers. When you start thinking about how you use inside and outside, I think another thing we're going to see that changes is a lot more team compensation, where the territories results get rewarded more equally to both outside and inside. No longer is grooming inside and then moving outside a career path. There's an opportunity for both in this sort of post-COVID world. They're going to be driven by metrics. What are the things that really are important? What activities drive sales, and are we doing those? And then do my team have time to do it? I was working with a client this week, and we talked about how much of their business comes from quotes where the customer asked for a quote to be done, and they were concerned that there's not time for follow-up. And we talked about how does the reward system reward both quoting versus follow-up. And maybe your team's going to need some better priority handlings. Do you need to quote every single opportunity that comes along? Or how do you increase your win rate? That's going to be a significant question in this post-COVID world. And then last of all, we want to hold on to our customers. And that means no longer face-to-face touches, but how do we have meaningful touches? Newsletters is one way, but maybe there's going to be advisory councils or more advisory councils that are held to get their inputs. Strategic invitations for them to join you at trade shows or conferences or maybe webinars. But that idea of continually at a smart cadence being in touch with your customers is going to be really important. And then the second part of that is how do you make sure that across the life cycle of that customer, you're adding value? What are the other things that you can do once you win the order to make sure that they continue to see you as a good and a strong partner? We're pushing business reviews as a great way to do that. Not only to have a status on the current business, but find ways to explore potential new business. Yes, a lot of these involve some new IT systems or electronic systems. What I'd encourage you to do is embrace what you can from this, work always towards getting more, and try to gain the first mover advantage. If your industry is not focused on using these tools, you may have a false sense of security, because when somebody does, the world's going to change, and you want to make sure that you're not left behind, but that you're really there to compete with that. Michelle will open it up now for questions. If anybody has a question, please feel free to chat or use the Q&A. We'd love to get your thoughts and interactions on kind of what those thoughts are and how the world's going to change in this new world. So if you've got a question, go ahead and send it off to us.
And we did get a question about whether we'd be sending out a recording. And yes, we will be sending out a recording of this presentation later today.
Yep. Anita Greenland, our chief experience officer, continues to tell me that like I should cut my amount of material in half. And so I guess maybe a second time to listen to it is a good thing. Let me just hit these immediate best practices. I think everybody needs to be focusing on how do you improve your sales fitness, whatever that means to you, whether it means upskilling your team, restructuring in terms of not maybe less heads, but how are they being used and how are they being deployed? Do you move more towards key accounts? Do you move away from key accounts? You've got to figure out what being in shape looks like for you. Really try to focus your results around messaging, activity, and opportunities. Those are the three mantras. Am I delivering the right message? Am I focused and doing the right things? And is that generating the right kind of opportunities as I look forward? Embrace virtual, but use them in person and use it in more meaningful ways. We've talked in the past about how muscle memory will tend to have us slip back into the old patterns that we had before. And so really think about how you're going to engage in that way. Figure out a way to share information better across your team and as close to real time as you can. And don't think that a tool does that. To me, it's a cultural change as well as having the right system for doing it. Again, long-term value of customers, we've talked about a lot, but they're going to become even more critical, especially those that are helping you both grow and generate the margins you need to. And then make sure you're keeping your folks up to date, not your folks, your customers up to date as you do this. Those are all critical parts as we move forward.
All right. Well, as we wait for any last minute questions, we'll remind you all that we do have the virtual boot camp coming up. Those sessions start this spring. You can email us at contact@thebrooksgroup.com if you're interested in registering. And otherwise, we will see you all next Friday, February 2 Fridays from now, February 26th.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.